TCU's 2-1 after whatever that was on Saturday night. A 21-point lead in the third quarter that ends up with a 1-point loss. We're going to break all of that down and a little bit more on this episode of Frogs Insider right now. Hello, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Frogs Insider. I'm Jamie Plunkett here with Melissa Treebwasser, as always, breaking down TCU's 35-34 loss to the UCF Knights. Melissa, I think it's safe to say that in the third quarter of this game, we didn't think this would be the type of podcast we'd be doing on Sunday night with the way the game had gone.
I think we started to get a feeling that the momentum was turning, but I think we were all still hopeful and expectant that TCU would find a way to get across the finish line and win a close game. I mean, I definitely did not think that game was over at any point. And in the third quarter, as it seemed like TCU couldn't do anything right on either side of the ball, I started to get a little bit nervous. But I still was confident TCU would find a way to win, even if UCF kept finding a way to stay close enough to be able to utilize their run game.
I think that's fair. We're going to break down all of what we saw from the Frogs on Saturday night. We're going to talk about how KJ Jefferson responded to what TCU's defense tried to do and what Gus Malzahn did incredibly well on that side of the football, frankly. But first, this is the Frogs Insider podcast presented by the Flying T Club. The Flying T Club is TCU's NIL collective. They support over 100 TCU student athletes. They partner with multiple organizations in and around the city of Fort Worth, which is how they've been able to maintain their 501c3 nonprofit status. If you want to learn more or get involved with the Flying T Club, you can go over to flyingtclub.com and check out all of the options available to you. Also, big shout out to Dave Campbell's Texas Football. We are a part of the Republic of Football Network. If you subscribe to that feed, you will get a podcast for every D1 football program in the state of Texas. We're talking TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, UT, but also UTSA, UTEP, Sam Houston State, Rice, and North Texas, who maybe still has a football program after what happened to them in Lubbock over the weekend. You can subscribe wherever you get your shows, whether that's Spotify, Apple, and if you only want the TCU content that we provide you here at Frogs Insider, just search Frogs Insider on Spotify, Apple, and now Amazon Music as well. We are live and available on Amazon. Breaking news to Melissa. I did that over the weekend. I did that last night, actually, after I was super irritated trying to write about this football game. So you can find the Frogs Insider content anywhere you want, including our YouTube channel as well. There is a video there of us paying out the 500 subscriber challenge, doing some smelling salts.
It was terrible.
It was awful. It was
Did you wake up in the middle of the night in pain? Because I literally woke up in the middle of the night in pain. And I don't know if it was smelling salts related or just pain. But I had to it was bad.
If it was normal,
happened to me last night.
I mean, I haven't been able to distinguish why I'm waking up in the middle of the night for a while now, other than just having to go to the bathroom. So let's be honest there. But we are, I think, over 600 subscribers already on the YouTube channel, so people are absolutely crushing it. We're very, very thankful for you guys for doing that, and we will do some sort of challenge at the 1,000 subscriber mark as well. So we'll get into that.
And Jamie has dropped some ideas for that, and I'll just say this, that you guys are going to want to get us to 1,000 because it's going to be terrible.
Honestly, at this point, guys, if the season goes south, you get us to 1,000 subscribers, I might just do meth. Who knows? I might just do meth. Frankly,
whatever it takes to get through,
Yeah, Melissa. Okay.
I mean, and I guess you did this last night. You said this last night, and it's a good thing to remember too. That was a terrible way to lose a football game. It wasn't a terrible loss. This is not a season-ending, all hope is gone type of loss. It was, if UCF had come in and played from the get-go how they played in the second half, then I think we all would have said, hey, that was just a better football team that came in, had their way with us, and walked out with the win, and they earned it. But TCU getting out to that big lead and then watching it just slowly shrink made that
Right.
loss feel so much worse than it was. I've said this at the beginning. I've said this all fall practice. UCF to me has a legitimate shot to make the Big 12 championship team. And what I saw last night did nothing but confirm that they have a chance to be up. I don't think anyone in the conference is going to be able to stop that run game. Other teams will do a better job of not letting KJ Jefferson beat them with their arms than TCU did. But I think that's a good football team, and I think that Gus has a real handle on who he has and how to use them, and they're going to put up points against everybody. And their defense was not great, but really locked down in the second half. So I think, I haven't seen anybody else that looks overly impressive to me. So I would not be shocked if they make it all the way.
Yeah, I'm looking at their schedule right now. They have a bye week this upcoming week, and then they host Colorado, so that'll probably be a win. Then they travel to Florida. Who knows if Billy Napier is still going to be the head coach there. That's probably a win as well. Cincinnati's probably a win. October 19th, they travel to Iowa State.
Tough game.
I think that's going to be a really big test for them. They host BYU and Arizona. I think Arizona will be a big test for their secondary. At Arizona State, who looks much better than we've thought they would so far this season. And then they finished the season at West Virginia and hosting Utah. So,
did you see what Kansas State's run game did to Arizona?
I did.
I'm not worried about.
I mean, I think it'll be a close one just because I think Arizona's offense will be able to keep up. Let's jump into this game a little bit because I know that before we started recording, you said that you were still a little ticked about how the game went last night. And let's start with TCU on the offensive side of the football because there's a lot to talk about defensively, and we're going to get into that a little bit. But offensively, Josh Hoover throws for over 400 yards. He ties a career high with 4 passing touchdowns. Jack Besh, with 200 receiving yards, becomes the first Horned Frog to record 200 receiving yards in a single game since Quentin Johnston did it against Kansas in 2006. Shout out to QJ, who had 2 touchdowns today for the Chargers as well. Big day for him. And you had Savion Williams record his first multi-touchdown game of his career.
Still
with
is
2
a stat
just
that shocks me.
I mean, it to an extent, sure, but I mean, last year he was so inconsistent, and then prior to that he was behind Quentin for several years. So, but I mean, 2 touchdowns on the most athletic catches I think I've seen him make in a second. I mean, mossing 2 guys at the same time and then completely stopping on a crossing route and catching the football behind him and getting both arms underneath it so that there wasn't even a question of whether or not it was catch. And you had a really great video angle of that you put up on social media, which I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
So offensively, the passing game was very good, I would say, on Saturday night. You don't throw for over 400 yards without it being a pretty good night. You scored 34 points. I think the challenge, and we talked about this a little bit right after the game, the run blocking is just non-existent. This offensive line, I don't think I've ever witnessed an offensive line that is, so good at pass blocking, because they really are a good offensive line when it comes to protecting Hoover in the pocket, but also so atrocious at blocking up for the run. And normally you'd think it's the other way around because typically offenses can run block better than they can pass block. But for TCU, some reason, the inverse is true.
Well, and it's the exact opposite of what we saw in camp, too. Like, you and I both, after that first scrimmage, were like, wow, this might be a really good, and again, what can you learn in camp? But this might be a really good run-blocking unit. But maybe what we saw with how UCF was able to just get whatever they wanted with their rushing attack was part of the issue, too.
Yeah, I mean, you saw what Stanford's mobile quarterback did. Ashton Daniels had a couple good runs. 289 rushing yards on 54 carries for UCF last night was just, you knew it was coming, and by the end of the game, you knew TCU wasn't going to be able to stop it. And credit to Gus Malzahn and KJ Jefferson for these 2 reasons. First of all, Gus Malzahn's offense is so interesting, and I think we talked about this in the middle of the game while it was happening. It felt like there was pre-snap motion on every single play, and I loved it. I thought that was really smart because you're always putting stress on the defense even before the snap. You're always making them think about 3 or 4 different things, and none of it was window dressing. They went to every single option at one point or another in the football game. So it's not like they were just running guys on sweeps pre-snap and never giving it to him. They gave it to him 3 or 4 times. Then they ran that motion and ran it back the other way with the guy who was coming on the reverse. They did all of this pre-snap motion, and then KJ Jefferson would just keep it, or RJ Harvey would get a handoff, and he would just run for 6, 7, 8 yards. And one of the things that I said on the preview episode last week as I was taking questions from the folks over at Horned Frog Blitz was, what I was really looking to see from TCU's defense on Saturday night was, are they going to be as willing of tacklers in the fourth quarter as they were in the first quarter? And I said I thought that would be a big point of emphasis. Like, if you can still hit KJ Jefferson and RJ Harvey willingly in the fourth quarter, I think TCU is going to be okay. And it turns out that they were not as willing in the fourth quarter to put their bodies on the line and fill those gaps the way that they should. And 5-yard runs turned into 8, 9, 10-yard runs. And on top of that, and this is where I really do need to give KJ Jefferson some credit, he threw the ball well, especially in the second half. He missed some terrible passes of open receivers in the first half, and that's part of the reason UCF fell behind. But he delivered the ball on time and on target for the most part in the second half, and TCU secondary struggled. Specifically, JT Broughton struggled to handle that in coverage. And when you have an offense that just does just enough to be balanced and keep a defense honest, we saw the result with TCU getting outscored 28-3 in the final 20 minutes of the football game on Saturday night.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, you have to give credit to KJ because as bad as he was in the first half, he did not miss a lot of throws in the second half. Yeah. And that, I mean, the game-winning touchdown was it was a good throw. It was a tough throw, and it was a throw that could have gotten his wide receiver killed. It almost did, but that was Kobe Hudson, right? That reeled that one in. I think, yeah. I mean, he made a heck of a play on the ball there, and just to stay with it. But he was able also to make those throws because the defense wore down so much for TCU. He wasn't under near as much pressure, and I do think part of that too isn't just that TCU wasn't able to get home. It's that it's really hard to throw a lot of your general pressures and blitzes at a quarterback that has been running all over you against a run game that's been running all over you, and with all of the pre-snap motion and all of the confusion that Gus does. I think TCU was playing on their heels, and like you said, just at some point physically, I think they were over it. Like, I mean, how many times did they run the ball Saturday night? Like 40 something, 54, I think.
54.
54, yeah. So at some point, you have to just be sitting there in the defensive huddle or just looking across like, are we really going to have to do this again? Are we really going to have to do this again? And then when your offense isn't in turn able to stay on the field and give you breaks and give you time to recuperate, it was hot, it was muggy, it was miserable field level. I am sure by the end of that game, I don't think that they stopped trying, but I just don't think that they had 100% to give anymore. And I think it showed in their body language and it showed in the results.
It did. And we asked a little bit about, willingness and physicality in the post-game press conference. I don't think Johnny Hodges appreciated it too much. He was asked it a couple of different ways. And he just kind of went back to a more PC answer than he's given in the past of, I need to go look in the mirror and see what I can do better. Which I think is true for everybody on that defense, and it's also true for Andy Avalos and that coaching staff, because at the end of the day, your offense gave you a 21-point lead, and you couldn't hold on to it. And there were some things that the offense did in the fourth quarter. We talked about it on Saturday night. The second to last possession that TCU had offensively was probably their worst offensive possession of the season to this point. A 3-and-out, multiple passes behind the line of scrimmage when you've got less than 5 minutes left in a football game that you're desperately trying to cling onto the lead. And you waste, 45 seconds of clock at most before you punt that ball and give it back to UCF, who takes pretty much the rest of the time to just march down the field and score a touchdown on your head to take the lead and ultimately win the football game.
When you asked Eddie Dykes about that strategy and about not running the football and about clock management, I mean, when you need every football coach we've ever talked to in all of history has talked about the ability to string together a 4-minute drive at every level. Like, that's something that you work on, that you practice, and that's a big part of your game. He came back with the fact that because UCF had timeouts, that he didn't think it necessarily mattered, and I can see where he's coming from, and I could get the argument of throwing the ball in that situation because that's what you've been doing all night and you have had success. But the throws they elected to make, the plays they elected to utilize, to me, that was inexcusable. You cannot throw the ball behind the line of scrimmage on 2 consecutive plays, especially when the first one gets you absolutely nothing. So you're behind the sticks at that point. There's just a lot. They had mismatches. They had opportunities where they were exploiting a UCF defense that stood up and made plays in the second half. So I will give them credit. But it's not like there was nowhere to go with the ball. It's not like they couldn't scheme guys open. It's not like Jack Besh had 200 yards on the night. I mean, there were things that could happen here. I just would have liked to have seen a little bit more creativity, a little bit more intent, and frankly, just something that was a little more logical on that final drive, because the minute that 3-and-out happened, I don't think there was a single person in the stadium that did not fully expect UCF to run right down the field and score to take the lead, and it was just a matter at that point of how much time was TCU going to have to respond.
Yes, and you're right. First of all, the atmosphere in the stadium was vastly different from the first half to the second half.
We got to have a talk.
TCU fans bailed on this game way before the third quarter was over. I think we started to see some people trickle out at 28-7. The student section was almost half empty at 31-13, and it changed the whole atmosphere of the stadium. And as UCF was getting momentum and getting things rolling, TCU had nobody to lean on in that stadium because half the people were gone, which is really disappointing. And I get that it was family weekend, but come on, it's first Big 12 game of the year. Stick it out.
Let's have a talk, TCU students. Let's have a real talk right here. Just you and me. Okay, it's just us listening.
Should I get out of camera? Should I just?
Yeah. Well, you understand this too. You're a part of this. TCU is never not out of a result of a game either way. They're never not capable of coming back and winning. They're never not capable of losing from ahead. As someone who sat there on the field as they honored the 1998 Sun Bowl team and got a little misty-eyed thinking about talking to one of my friends over Christmas break about TCU winning that game, and that's when I legitimately fell in love with TCU football, I can promise you over the course of the 26 ensuing years, I have seen literally everything from this program. They are not incapable of shocking you in one way or the other in any given game. A game is never over when it comes to TCU football. Keep your butts in the seats. It is Big 12 play. You did an amazing job that first half. The fans were awesome. It was electric. The environment was perfect. You don't get to leave. Like, that's why they removed in and out privileges, because nobody would come back after halftime. They'd go out to the tailgates and they'd stay there. Again, I know it was family weekend. You could send mom and dad home if you need to, if they're tired and they need a break. But if you're going to be one of the kids that takes one of those spots, you need to stay there until that game is over. Like, that to me was so disappointing, and what started out as one of the best game day atmospheres I have seen in recent memory and became just another disappointment in a night full of them. So I will 100% call out fans, because I've sat through my fair share of really bummer of a games, probably because I have to now, but it just sucks when you have an opportunity to get back in a situation and get back in a game that seems like it's gotten away from you, and the UCF fans were louder, and it was such a bummer. So y'all, like, if you're gonna show up, stay. If you're gonna show up, stay. It's a Big 12 conference game. Like, suck it up. I was tired too. I'm sure there were other things people wanted to do, but I was really disappointed in the student section and the crowd as a whole in the second half of that game. It really just kind of put a cherry on top of a poop Sunday of a night.
Poop Sunday.
Mm-hmm. I was sensitive.
Maybe that's gonna be the name of the episode.
Yeah,
let me write that down. But hey, I will say this: it's interesting that it came on the heels of the student section setting the 4th highest ever attendance for a game against Long Island.
Yeah.
And then that was the student section showed up for the first Big 12 game of the year. It was,
and I don't care that they left against Long Island. Like, that's fine. That game was over in the third quarter against an undermatched opponent. This is not Long Island. This was UCF. This was a statement opportunity for both teams. You know, the team that won that game was going to end up ranked on Monday. UCF will absolutely be ranked, in my opinion. Like, this was it. And this was a nationally televised game. This was a Fox primetime game. If for nothing else, do it so that we look good, because perception is reality. And in this era of God only knows what's going to happen next in college football. That stuff matters, and it matters for the recruits. And watching the sad recruits get escorted away from the locker room as the players were walking, like, it just felt like every time you looked, there was something else that was just such a bummer about the way Saturday night went.
Yeah, it definitely didn't end the way we thought it would. I kind of, just to put a bow on this game, I think the thing that stood out to me the most near the end of the game was the fact that even with their backs to the wall and even knowing that they weren't going to run the football at all, this offense still moved it relatively easily down the field to get into field goal position, somewhat of field goal position for Kyle Lemmerman. And it's really interesting that, and I know that maybe UCF's secondary was prevent a little bit more on the final drive than on the second to last drive, but you had the same opportunity 4 minutes prior to push the ball down the field. Jack Besh, like you said, 200 yards receiving, but let's talk about how he did it. I mean, these were chunks.
Yeah. Over
the middle of the field, deep post routes. He could have had 250 yards if Josh Hoover doesn't overthrow him once on a deep post. And we saw just some really inconsistent play calling in the fourth quarter on both sides of the football from these coordinators, and it was just it felt like they were both trying to stop the bleeding in their own way and just couldn't staunch it, couldn't get the gauze on it in time. We saw, I don't know if you caught this, Melissa, we saw TCU go to a 3-man front against UCF late in the second half, and in my head I'm thinking, why?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that?
Running the football.
If all they're doing is running the football. There was a moment on like a 3rd and 6 where TCU had 2 defensive linemen on the field and then 3 or 4 extra linebackers standing up near the line, and RJ Harvey broke off like a 10 or 11 yard run. I'll need to go find the clip. But when you've gotten to that point where you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall, I mean, you can tell that you've lost all momentum and pretty much all hope at that point.
And players know too.
Yeah.
When you start making desperate types of calls or lack of confidence calls, because I think those the behind the line of scrimmage passes were lack of confidence in those moment calls. Like, I don't understand it. Like, why do you prevent defense is preventing to win, right? Like, we've all heard that thing, and it's the same thing when you go away from what's been successful and what's been working. Like, I get that TCU never really slowed down the UCF offense. They blocked a couple of kicks. They got kind of lucky with some plays, but they were able to, it was the bend don't break philosophy in the first half. But at the end of the day, they were at least doing enough to keep KJ somewhat on his heels. And when he was throwing, they were hurrying him enough where he wasn't accurate. So they went away from that. And then on offense, I mean, what we know 3 games into the season is that Jack Besh and Savion Williams are not just great receivers. They are elite receivers and potentially 2 of the best and most dangerous players in the conference at the position. What they're capable of doing, the stats that they're putting up, the way that they're putting up those stats. I don't think you can argue that TCU does not have 2 of the elite receivers in this conference and frankly 2 of the elite talents in the country. Why neither of those guys, I don't think either of them touched the ball on the 2 previous drives before the field goal attempt drive. Maybe Jack might have had 1. He might have had a 3rd down conversion. I don't think
Savion did, because on the 3 and out, he caught that drag route.
That's right.
Which would have been a great first down call to just give him a little drag over the middle and let him take it 6-7 yards downfield and set you up really nicely. But they ran that on 3rd and 8, and he gained 6 yards, and then you had to punt.
And that to me makes no sense when we've seen them in the first half of both games now do the feed Savion drive, right? And so, like, why would you not feed Savion in that moment? Like, he's the one guy that you know can make a contested catch in the middle of the field, or really. Now, we've seen him have some drops too, but that's still the guy that I want to go to in those situations if given the opportunity. So, yeah, I mean, it's just frustrating. Like, it's just a frustrating game because it was right there for TCU. And, I mean, they just let it slip away in a way that you shouldn't do at home. And home losses in a conference like this can be devastating. Except the season's not over. Neither one of us thought that this was a team that was going to win 10 games. We thought it was possible. And a win last night would have made that more of a possibility. But you have to turn the page. You get the emotional drain of having to go over to SMU and play a team that's also super desperate, like way more desperate than TCU probably, and hates your guts and hates your coach's guts. So there's going to be a lot there. I don't know if they are capable of building a fan base, but the 45 or so fans that are there will be really into what's happening on the field, I'm sure. And then you follow that with a really super desperate Kansas team on the road. So you get out of this at 4-1, fine. Like that's about what I was hoping. That would have been probably my best hope out of that situation. You come out of it 3-2. Now you're starting to be a little bit more worried because you haven't even hit the worst stretch of your season, in my opinion.
I agree, and you've got 2 more mobile quarterbacks coming up with Kevin Jennings being named the starter for this upcoming week against SMU, and then obviously Jalen Daniels. We know very well what he can do when healthy. I will say this: I'm gonna cut SMU fans a little bit of slack right now, and this is I had an epiphany over the weekend, Melissa.
Okay.
I had an epiphany. If your stadium experience was as bad as SMU's is.
True.
Where you can't even get water, where you're not sure when the toilets are going to start overflowing, when it takes you an hour and a half to get into the stadium, I wouldn't go either. Now, I will be there on Saturday because I'm getting paid. But
I'm not, but I'm still going to be there.
Maybe not. Maybe if I was an SMU person, I would see the $150 million new facility for players or whatever and say, hey, could we get like $10 to maybe like do something nice for fans in the stadium to draw them in? Like, it's just not an appealing situation for fans, and I can understand that they'd rather hang out and tailgate on the boulevard than go and sit in that stadium, if you can call it that.
I think that's fair.
But it's also very fun to say 45 SMU fans because that is the real number.
Yeah, that's the
that
actual.
is the real number. I pity all 45 of them for the stadium experience they're subjected to every single week.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing that we're going to hear it from fans all week about how we lost. They're not going to care that they have 2 losses already this season. None of that's going to matter. It's going to be one.
Do
of
they
those
have 2?
weeks.
They're
Or
2-1.
I have
They're
no
2-1.
idea. I
They
know
should have lost to
BYU.
Nevada.
Oh, that's right.
They lost.
That's right.
They
did
lost to
come back
BYU.
and
They
beat
blew.
Nevada.
Yeah, Nevada blew it.
So they're 2-1. They're coming off of a bye week.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be one of those weeks. I cannot wait. I think we all know that guy Greg who drops into all of our DMs and just curses at us.
He doesn't drop into my DMs anymore. He blocked me.
It. Oh, he blocked you. I think I finally blocked him.
Yeah.
Because I just don't care. I don't need STFU in my DMs anytime I say anything about SMU. Which after this episode, one more preview, a recap, and one more year. Hopefully, we'll never have to talk about them again.
That would be nice. It would be nice. And I'll be sure to. I'm going to track this year, Melissa. I've decided. All of the national folks who do their shows every week, who preview the college football weekend, I'm going to track who talks about TCU SMU beforehand and whether or not they rag on TCU for canceling the series. And then I'm going to go back to each of those episodes next week and see how much time they spend talking about the actual game.
It's a good idea. It's a bad use of your time.
Football game. No, I'm committed. I'm committed. After last year, when TCU got so much BS from people about, oh, wow, how dare you cancel this game and how dare you end a rivalry that's so historic. And then I think one show of the many, many college football shows I listen to every week, one Split Zone Duo, shout out to Godfrey, you're a real one, for actually mentioning the score of the football game. Pate didn't.
Of course.
Solid Verbal didn't.
Of course.
Cover 3 didn't. None of the shows I listened to other than SCD actually talked about the football game after it happened, but they all talked about it before, and they all poo-pooed TCU for not wanting to play it anymore.
Wait, what was that? How did you just say that word?
Poo-poo. They poo-pooed TCU. They poo-pooed TCU.
Poo-pooed?
Yes, they did. Well, they poo-pooed on TCU. They straight up.
It's not the word; it's how you say it. Just
it's poo-poo
poo-poo
in my home. Okay, it's poo-poo. But it was ridiculous last year, and so I'm gonna document it this year and just see how people handle the iron skillet, and then I'm gonna be curious to know how they felt or how they feel about LSU not playing Tulane anymore, how they feel about hey, Bedlam doesn't exist anymore, which is a real bummer and way better of a game than the iron skillet. And also, TCU still plays its primary rival every year in Baylor. So what are we really doing here? What are we really doing here?
What are we really doing, indeed?
Maybe that's the name of the episode. What are we really doing here? Anywho, TCU plays SMU at 4 p.m. Central Time on the CW. So if you don't know what channel that is, just Google Dawson's Creek, and you'll know what channel TCU's football is playing on Saturday. Don't bring it up to SMU fans, though. They're really sensitive about it. They will send you screenshots of ratings in order of from highest to lowest, but then they'll crop the 10 games above the CW to make you think that it was actually the most watched game of the week, when in reality it wasn't even in the top 10.
Are they sending ratings, or are those just the numbers from their checking accounts?
It's not the checking accounts. It's only 3 digits. So
okay, it's not. Yeah,
they are really rich. They are really rich.
Money.
So
they do have a lot of money. Good
tip
for
of the
them.
cap. Tip of the
They're
cap, I guess.
Spending a lot of money on that 2-1 football team.
Yeah, just to be in the ACC, and
yeah.
Hey, I mean, they'll get a win against Florida State and be able to brag about that for a little while, I suppose. But that's going to be one hell of a rock fight.
Listen, TCU players and coaches and everyone involved with the program, I just again, I try not to be overly critical. I will call out specific things. I never try to call out players, but I'm just going to say this: you guys have to win this game. Mm-hmm. I cannot live in the Metroplex with this L sitting on my chest. It just will not happen. So please win. I don't want to move back. I just got here.
There are two options, right? There are two wolves available to us in this moment. And the first wolf is Florida State, where you got your teeth kicked in week 1, and then you allowed your teeth to get kicked in again in week 2, and then Memphis did whatever that was on Saturday morning this week, 20-12 or whatever the hell the final score was there. Or you could be Notre Dame, who lost to NIU last week and then went to Purdue and exorcised every demon that program has ever had. I think they hung 60 plus on Purdue.
More than that. I thought they might have gotten to 70.
I don't know. They beat Purdue's ass. I do know that. And
like the drum.
Yes. They mistreated Purdue's big drum on that field in Indiana. I think Indiana.
It's in Indiana.
On Saturday. The Midwest is a weird place. Middle America. Tell me more. Tell me more about who you choose to be and the foods you choose to eat. But I'll say this: if TCU chooses the latter path and they just come out with their hair on fire and absolutely whip SMU's tail, that'll be a sign that this team is in fact different from 2023. Because TCU, when they started to stack a couple losses last year, you could see which way things were going pretty clearly, especially after that Kansas State game. And they showed some grit in a one-score win against SMU. Not as much in this one-score loss to UCF. Or sorry, Stanford.
Stanford, yeah.
Not as much in this one-score loss to UCF. But hey, bounce back, have a good weekend, and maybe we'll see what this team is made of.
And Josh Hoover said all the right things post-game about it. Just he pulled the Bill Belichick onto Cincinnati. So, I do believe him, and I do think that the players will follow him. So we'll hear Tuesday, about what a great best practice they've had all season, right, leading up to it. So it'll be interesting to see how they respond on the field against a team that, even when TCU was a 5-7 team, they still doubled up. So I think that this is TCU's game to win, and it's important that they put that one under their belts and bounce back and get back on track before conference play becomes the rest of their season.
Yep. Just figure it out.
Figure it out.
Figure it out.
Yes.
Figure it out. All right. Melissa, one more note on the UCF game before we move on to what it is that you were about to say, which might be about the UCF game. I don't know. We don't have a run sheet tonight. We are flying.
It was not
zooming.
About the UCF team.
Okay.
So yarding, actually, but.
Yes. So we... God almighty. The wheels are
Jamie
shaking.
hates me so much.
No, I do not. I do not.
You kicked me out of the press box last night because I made a dumb joke.
I didn't kick you out.
You guys made me go.
The
back
wheels
down to
were
the field.
falling off
Yeah,
the
it's
game,
true.
and
It's
so we
true.
said, get back down to the field and start clicking at camera more, and it didn't work.
Nope.
They got into field goal range, so we'll give you credit for that.
It's true.
And shout out to Kyle Lemmerman because that kick was long enough.
Yeah.
58-yarder. It had the juice. It was just wide right.
Yeah.
He's going to hit a couple of those in his career, and it's going to be really fun to see. No, the final touchdown that UCF scored, there was a targeting call on Bud Clark. He will be out for the first half against SMU because of that targeting call. So we're going to see a little Richard Toney at safety, I think, again against the Mustangs in the first half. That'll be something to keep an eye on.
All right, moving on. Hey, I was going to talk a little bit about TCU soccer.
Yeah, let's do it.
A team that has had a difficult time getting on the scoreboard against some good competition, played to a draw with I think they were ranked number 11 coming into the game, Texas Tech. They won the Big 12 last year. Very, very good Texas Tech program. Very physical Texas Tech program. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I encourage you to go back and scroll back to, I think, Friday morning and look at the photos that I posted from that game. Just an insanity of just bodies flying, elbows flying, and just absolute physical chaos. But they dropped, I think, 5 goals today against Cal Poly. It was senior day. They got to celebrate those seniors. There are a lot of really quality veterans on this team, a lot of one-year players, grad transfers as well. So good to see. I was not able to get out there to watch in person because I had my first flag football games of the season.
Woo.
So had to do some coaching, but just Cal Poly is not what they're used to seeing. It's a solid West Coast program, but they're not an elite program. Not a Power 5 or Power 4 program. But it's good to see them get the ball in the net. This team has a tough stretch coming up. They will play BYU on Thursday at home. BYU, I think, was in the Final Four last year or something. They are annually one of the best programs in the country. So they'll come to Garvey Rosenthal on Thursday night. Highly encourage everybody to get out there for that one. And then I think Arizona comes to town on Sunday. So nice little home stretch for the Horned Frogs. They get a handful of games here in a row. Definitely get out there if you haven't. It is although I have a lot to learn about the game of soccer, I have a blast going to those games. Just an awesome team, great program, great environment. They're fun to watch. They play a really physical brand of soccer. Volleyball, Jamie, they knocked off UCLA in 4 sets, I believe, 3-1. Melanie Parra is looking like she could be an All-American level candidate. What she is doing on the court, she is making history for TCU. She is going to go down as one of the best players to ever wear a TCU uniform, and that is well-deserved. This program, they got ranked for the first time. They've played a very, very challenging preseason schedule. They hosted the Fight in the Fort this past week, and they've got a lot of home games coming up. I think it might be SMU. No, it's UTA. They're playing UTA on Tuesday night at home. So not one of those, high-powered opponents, but another great atmosphere, a really great program that is building some positive momentum. You're going to want to jump on that bandwagon, I think, if you are a TCU athletics fan. And whenever you're feeling badly about TCU football, go check out soccer or volleyball. They will remind you of why it's always great to support TCU athletics. Both those programs are just awesome and fun to watch.
They really are. They really are. I attempted to get out to the UCLA game on Friday night, but could not swing it with our family schedule that we had. We had some stuff going on.
I think I'll be there Tuesday. I think I'll be
awesome.
there Tuesday for you.
Heck yeah. It'll be, what Jason Williams has done in less than 3 full seasons at the helm is nothing short of miracle work, frankly.
Yeah.
And I think, you talk about how fun those 2 sports are, those 2 programs. Women's basketball coming up soon, too.
Oh, God, I can't wait.
My goodness.
So fired up.
My goodness. Women's basketball is going to be great. Speaking of hoops, but on the men's side, they hosted an open practice on Saturday afternoon for some former players, some families of folks. I managed to stop by because it was about 4 hours before kickoff of the football game, watched the team practice, and it was a lot of fun just to be back on that court and just watching those guys practice. But there were also 2 potential future Frogs in attendance as well. 2 top 70 kids that I talked about last week on the show that made their way to campus, and Caden Edwards and Nigel Walls were both there taking in practice. Both had a pretty good time this week visiting the Horned Frogs. from what I understand. So TCU basketball's recruiting. They're moving and shaking. The basketball's getting in shape. I will say this, because last year preseason, I know that you fell in love with Trey Tennyson because of the shot that he had, and not being in town, you didn't have the opportunity as much to see some of the behind the scenes. Although you did catch one of their preseason practices before a football game, and that's when it really clicked for you.
That's when I fell in love
with him.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna really like Brendan Wenzel this year. The kid from Wyoming, he's about 6'7". He has an incredibly beautiful shot. They were working on it in a variety of ways, specifically in transition, while I watched practice on Saturday, and I don't think he missed.
A trailing three. Is he going to be a trailing three guy this year?
It would appear that he is an option to be one of the trailers that shoots the long shot.
Oh, my heart. You did text me, and you basically said, "I think I found your new basketball crush." I'm excited. I love football, always love football, but one of the things I missed most not being in town was basketball and baseball, and just going to those games and being a part of that environment and that atmosphere regularly. Yeah. Look, I am not thinking that this TCU basketball program is going to light the world on fire in the Big 12 this year, just because the conference slate is so impossible and there's so many new pieces. But I do think that this will be a really, really fun team to watch, and not necessarily as frustrating as some of the things that we've seen in the past. So I'm fired up. I mean, that season, it's still a ways away, but shoot, I mean, we're at the halfway point of September today. So October will be here before you know it, and pretty soon that schedule should be dropping soon, I would imagine, the full schedule. I think we'll get that in the next couple of weeks, hopefully. There's a lot to be excited about. There's going to be, it has a chance to be a good late fall, early winter season. I think, you'll have volleyball. It looks like they're bound for the postseason. Soccer has a really good shot to be a postseason team. We'll see what football can do to get their act back together, but there should be a ton of momentum on campus as basketball gets ready to tip off too.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun. I will say a little undersized in the front court, but very athletic and fast. And so we'll see how those things impact this team. Melissa, you got anything else? We good here?
The post L shows are never our most, longest, most exciting shows, but I feel like we did a good job covering everything. Highly encourage you guys to go check out the post game that we did live from Amon G. Carter Stadium. Watch us suffer in so many ways. There was all kinds of suffering, emotional, physical, and otherwise. Yes. But this is a big week at TCU. There's a lot going on. You have volleyball at home, you have soccer at home, and then you've got football just down the road at SMU. So get out there, support the local teams, and let's see if we can get back on the winning track across the board here.
Let's do it. Let's make sure that the fan attendance is.
I don't want to have another talk with you kids.
Up to snuff.
Yeah,
as,
I don't want to have to
people Melissa's age say. Up to snuff. Anyways, that's going to do it for this episode of Frogs Insider. I am Jamie Plunkett. She is Melissa Treebwasser. You can find the show wherever you get your podcasts, and that now includes Amazon Music. So make sure that you're subscribed. Leave us a rating and review. Subscribe over at the YouTube channel as well, because when we get to 1,000 subscribers over there, we are going to do something probably more spicy challenge related, because that's really my wheelhouse. And Melissa hasn't really done many of those in our time.
I haven't lost many bets,
doing shows
I guess,
together.
So.
This is true. And we will be back later this week with our SMU preview. Melissa's going to be talking to somebody. We'll keep that one under wraps until the episode drops. Yep. And we will go from there. But anyways, we'll talk to you later. Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.